Welcome back to the IDP Plus podcast. It's your host, Johnny. And on this episode, I'm going to talk to you about top 12 IDP defensive backs when it comes to redraft. So my rankings go to 24, but this is just part one. So subscribe to our IDP Plus YouTube to stay informed and get that notification when the part 2, 13 through 24 comes out. I will be covering those rankings as well. We're going to get right into it. I'm going to start sharing my screen here so you can see my top 12 rankings, early rankings, that is. This may be adjusted after training camp and before the season starts. But as it is right now, number one I have ranked is Brian Branch. Probably not a surprise to a lot of people. Number 2, Budda Baker. 3, Antoine Winfield. 4, Jaquan Brisker. 5, Nick Cross. 6, Kevin Byard. 7, Travis Hunter, the rookie. 8, Kyle Hamilton. 9, Derwin James. 10, Julian Love. 11, Jessie Bates. And to round out our defensive back ones, Kyle Duggar stays on the list. So looking at this list here, I have a lot of consistency players that have been consistent, vets. I'm not scared of really age. I have somebody over 30 years old. Kevin Byard's on this list, and he was a great bet last year. Do have some younger guys too. Nick Cross, Brian Branch, a little bit less proven, but still a nice blend. We do focus mostly on the tackles, even though you don't have to be number one. You don't have to be the best tackler to be number one on this list. As you can see, starting out with Brian Branch, my first guy, 23-year-old. Last season, the first column here, I have games played in 2024. He missed one game. He played 16. He averaged 6.8 tackles per game. If you can average about anything over 6, so I'd say 6.5 or more is comfortable tackles per game, and that's a solid bet for IDP production. Tackles is the number one output, the number one statistic we are looking at. Sure, there's players, Derwin James, who had 5.5 sacks. Winfield last year, 6 sacks, but you really can't bank on that. But Brian Branch does a nice blend here overall. As you can see, 2024, 79 solo tackles, 30 assists. That's the second season he's played, and the first time he's gone over 100. Hopefully he can build on that performance and come back 2025 with about 120 tackles. That's what I have him projected for. But Brian Branch, as I mentioned, does it all. You can see 8 tackles for loss, 4 interceptions, 16 pass defense. So in leagues that you are not really getting the most points for tackles, if you're in big play scoring, if you're getting maybe 2 or 3 points for pass deflections, maybe 5, 6 points, 4 or 5 points for interceptions, Brian Branch holds more weight in that league. In tackle heavy leagues, he still is very productive, still is very consistent. If you have a safety who's getting over 100, especially 110 tackles, fine IDP production, and just the overall blend and the ascension that Brian Branch has proved and given us over the last 2 seasons. We know him as a big-time prospect. He's getting into the prime of his career, still only 23. These other guys have a little bit more question marks to them, but I think Brian Branch is absolutely on the trend up. I do think you can make a case for him to fall back to 2 or 3, absolutely, especially in tackle-heavy formats. But Brian Branch is definitely a very well-rounded player, leads to the top 12 here in pass defense, ties for the lead with Jessie Bates with interceptions. He had a sack last season, still is able to, even though he's more of a traditional safety now versus rookie when he was playing often cornerback, he's still able to play those box snaps, get at the quarterback, 8 tackles for loss. So just about every half game, he's getting a tackle for loss. Brian Branch, it would be a surprise to me if he doesn't build on last season. I know Jack Campbell's there, Alex Anzalone's there again, but it's not like we have Alex Singleton and TJ Edwards stealing all those tackles. I do think the tackles actually come up, and that average goes from a little bit higher from 6.8 to maybe in the 7s, and that would make Brian Branch elite, top notch, no doubt. So Brian Branch, I don't think there's much risk involved with his game. He can get it done in multiple facets. But perhaps if you're looking just in tackle-heavy scoring formats, we know he finished number 1 last year, but my number 2 on this list for 2025 right now is 29-year-old Budda Baker. Budda Baker, as you can see, played all 17 games, has the highest average amongst safeties, not only on the top 12 of my list, but all safeties playing a full season. He has paced the league with the most tackles per game, over 9.5 with 9.6 for an astounding 164 tackles. And those weren't all cheap. You can see almost 100 of those were solo tackles. 7 out of the 17 games played were over double-digit tackle games. And I put this barometer in there, this statistic, because I think it's a good barometer. If you can have a player that gets about 5 or 6, basically a third of their games are double-digit tackle games, to me, it's a statistic that isn't really, you won't find it on Yahoo, you won't find it really much of elsewhere, but I put a lot of weight into that. Budda Baker, out of the safeties who played a full season, he was number one as far as double-digit tackle games. Just about half the games he played, he was getting you more than 10 tackles. So 7 out of 17 paces the list once again. Didn't only stop there. He had 10 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, didn't have an interception, only had 1 forced fumble. Still something to hang your hat on there with a forced fumble, and 5 passes defense. So obviously the most important piece to Budda Baker's game is the tackle ability, and that's okay. We're going to hang our hat on that. That's all we need him to do. Now, they really didn't do much as far as the defensive backfield there. They're still rolling with, as of right now, Jalen Thompson, but there could be some Taylor Dadrion. I forget his name, a hyphenated name. He's a young guy too. I know they call him Rabbit. Taylor Dedrin, something like that. That guy might have an opportunity here coming up to knock out Jalen Thompson for the starting role next to Budda Baker. I'm interested to see what that would do for his production. For fantasy, we want Jalen Thompson there because that's how it was last year. And Budda Baker had paced the league as far as safeties with 164 tackles. So very impressive there. If you're chasing tackles and you said you wanted Budda Baker, he should be number one at the list. I'm not going to argue that. I absolutely understand that. And you know what? As a matter of fact, last season, you might say to me, 2023, not this past season, but 2 seasons ago, Johnny, those numbers were an outlier. Budda Baker only played 12 games in 2023, only had 87 tackles, which is much lower as an average, only 7.25 tackles per game versus his 2024 production, 9.5. So the tackles weren't there. He did have half a sack, 7 tackles for loss, and 6 pass defense 2 years ago in 2023. But I'm going to tell you that look further back because in 2019, Budda Baker, this is not a unfamiliar. It's not like this is a one-time deal. He's still only 29, seemingly. I don't know how. It seems like he's been playing for over 10 years, but still in the prime of his career. Not too long ago, 2019, in 16 games played, missed 1 game, or maybe they didn't have 17 regular season games at that time, but nonetheless, 16 games played. He had 147 combined tackles. 104 of those were solo. So he even had more solo tackles in 2019. That was quite a bit of time ago, 5-6 years at this point. But Budda Baker, when he's on, he's on. And could it revert to a 100 tackle season? Sure, but I really don't see that likely, especially when things haven't changed much there in Arizona. So Budda Baker, to me, don't overthink it. Sure, there might be some regression due, but even if he ends at 140, 130 tackles, he's still going to be worth the investment. And of course, you're not picking Budda Baker as your first IDP off the board. You're probably going defensive line, linebacker, and then coming back to defensive backs. But Budda Baker is one of the most solid bets as it gets. Will he have over 164 tackles? No, I'd put money on that. But still, if he can end up in that 130, 140 range, he doesn't need much else to make his production. Sure, the tackles for loss help. He had the most. He's tied for the most with Derwin James tackles for loss on this list. Speaking of last year, but again, if we can get 140 tackles, there doesn't need to be any more stats on the board on the stat sheet. That will do in itself. So Budda Baker, still a fine player at 29 years old, number 2 on my list. Moving on to number 3, I have a 26-year-old Antoine Winfield. As you can see, I have 9 games played, but really, I believe that last game was like 23% of snaps and didn't record a tackle in it. So really, let's call it 8 games played last season. He had 60 tackles, an average of 7.5, which fits the bill. 2 out of those 9 games played, or 8, however you want to call it, were double-digit tackle games. So really, that's a quarter. So that's our 4 or 5 double-digit tackle games if we look at it from a scale of a full season. checks the bill. Antoine Winfield, I know he was banged up, had a knee injury, but I can't knock him lower than 3 on this list, and he could easily become the number 1 again. He was there last season in our rankings. He was somebody who really believed in, and when he was on the field, he did tremendous. He still had his 2 sacks, and remember, this is a player that 2023 had 6 sacks, so a lot of people hung their hat on that. I told you it was going to come down, but actually, it really, if he played a full season, you're probably looking at 4 or 5 sacks. So it really didn't come down much, and that's comfortable to know that we know that Antoine Winfield, not only are we getting a solid number of tackles, a solid ratio, but we can also have the chance for sacks, tackles for loss. Didn't record a forced fumble in 2024, but is part of his game. But mostly, all we really need here is some sacks and the tackles. If he can average that 7.5 tackles, you're probably looking upwards of 120 on the season. And Antoine Winfield, ascends to that top 1 or top 2 spot again. So Antoine Winfield, again, don't forget the kind of year he had in 2023. He hit over 120 tackles. He had 122. He had 6 sacks, 6 forced fumbles in that season, 3 interceptions, 12 pass defense, and 6 tackles for loss. So looking at these numbers here from just 2024, it's a shock to see him this high, but don't forget the type of player he is. Battled with injuries last year throughout the season. So I'm cutting him some slack. I'm throwing away last year, and I'm looking at 2 years ago. Antoine Winfield is going to be needed on that defense. He's going to have to rebound. Really didn't bring much linebacker help there. Levante David, still, of course, the man in his prime at 35 years old, is still getting it done. But I think this is a big year for Antoine Winfield. He's going to help kind of fix some deficiencies at that defense and be in the mix more often. So I'm looking for over 120 tackles and some big plays for Antoine Winfield. So maybe some good value there. Moving on, 26-year-old Jaquan Brisker. Jaquan Brisker only played 5 games in 2024. Had 8 tackles per game, though. That's pretty effective. Easily, 8 games, 5 games played. He had 40 tackles. Nice round number there. So a nice average of 8. Jaquan Brisker, one of those 5 games to start, I believe he played the first 5 and then was injured with concussions, which we'll come back to. Derailed his whole rest of the season. But one of those games were double-digit tackle games, so he was on pace to have 3 or 4 last year. It was very, anytime you're averaging over 8 tackles per game, you're almost getting double-digit tackles a game. So something definitely to hang your hat on there. In only 5 games played, he still had 3 tackles for loss, his usual sack, an interception. This guy's a forced fumble machine. He had 1 in those 5 games played and 2 pass defense. You're really here for the tackles. Maybe some sacks, maybe some interceptions and forced fumbles makes for a nice sugar on the lemonade. But really, we're here for the tackles. And if he would have went, 17 games played, you have 8 tackles per game. You're looking at 136 tackles. So very adequate there. Would have been easily, top 5 in the league as far as tackles. Jaquan Brisker, of course, though, we had mentioned the concussions. That is his, asterisk. That's his bugaboo. We don't know if, one more concussion and he's done playing for good. I feel a little bit better about him in redraft than I do in dynasty, of course. But, Jaquan Brisker missed 16 of the 51 games so far in his career. He's been in the league for 3 years and missed 14 and then 2 15 games played seasons. So, of course, missed 16 out of 51. Not something that we like to see. Jaquan Brisker, if he can stay, if you're telling me right now he's playing a full 17 games played, absolutely he's in my top 3, no doubt about it. And just with that being said, for some reason, if Jaquan Brisker does get hurt and Kevin Byard, is the kind of main tackle getter there in the backfield like we saw to close the year last year, then Kevin Byard absolutely would step in right where Jaquan Brisker was. So Kevin Byard a little bit later, we'll talk about him, but these guys are very tackle heavy machines, and especially if one gets hurt, the other one just gets bumped up that much more. So we could be talking about one of these guys as a top 3 defensive back. I do think if they're both healthy, it's probably going to be Brisker, but we'll get to Byard and don't forget about him as well. Moving on to number 5, I have Nick Cross, who actually had the second most tackles, only behind Budda Baker, 146. When we have Budda Baker getting 164, you're kind of in the weeds there a little bit. But Nick Cross still, if Budda Baker didn't play a whole season, he's probably going to be number one scoring. As it was, he was number two in tackle-heavy leagues as far as safety fantasy points because of those tackles. And they weren't cheap. 87 solos, 59 assists. He averaged 8.6 tackles per game. This guy was tackling like a linebacker. As you can see, 6 out of 17 games played, he had 10 or more tackles. And I believe one of those games he had against Tennessee only one tackle. So really, we could look at this stats and say 16 games played, 145 tackles. Insane. Really didn't do much to address the linebackers right there as it is in Indy as of now. Jermaine Pratt is not coming there. He went to the Raiders. So we're hoping that it is just Zaire Franklin and Jalen Carley's, and that's going to help Nick Cross retain this kind of production. Now, they did sign Cam Bynum this year. He's going to be the free safety. Maybe that takes some production off Nick Cross. Even we can afford to lose some tackles. Say if he regresses to 140, 130 tackles, that's still absolutely top three defensive back output. And you see, it wasn't just all tackles. Even though he is predominantly, we're here for the tackles with Nick Cross. He did have 6 tackles for loss, a sack, 3 interceptions, which is pretty substantial there. 1 forced fumble and 5 pass defense, the second lowest or third lowest on this league on this page for a full season played. So once again, Nick Cross, predominantly we're here for the tackles. I do think he is going to repeat, have a strong performance. I don't know about 146, but I'm saying north of 125. So Nick Cross, I'm not really worried that 2023 he was a part-time player, only had 2 starts. I'm not really worried about Cam Bynum right now. This is a volatile position as it is. A lot of these guys can get hurt, have down years. So I am putting a lot of weight into last year. Nick Cross, if you look up his name on Google, a lot of hype around him. Doing my research, I can find that he's an anchor of their defense. They expect more out of him. So Nick Cross is somebody who I'm feeling pretty firm at as a top 5 defensive back this year. No way around it. Moving on to number 6, I have Kevin Byard. Kevin Byard, the oldest man on the list, but absolutely deserves his flowers. So, as we can see, just kind of a trend with Kevin Byard. He became a great IDP tackler kind of later in his career. He first started as that deep free safety for Tennessee, but when he went to other teams, bounced around, whether it be Philly or a couple years here in Chicago now, we can see him have some consistency as far as tackles. He wasn't always a 100 or more tackle kind of safety, but he's had 100 or more tackles in the last 3 seasons. So I'm absolutely buying in the consistency here with Kevin Byard. I don't care if he plays till he's 34. If you're an old IDP head like myself, you remember Antoine Bethea. That guy was 34, 35 years old and still top 5 in tackles for safety. So Kevin Byard ages like fine wine here, averaging 7.6, right above that 7.5. Very juicy tackles per game. And they weren't cheap. Again, 80 were solos, 50 were assists. So he's getting to the ball carrier first, and if not, he's getting in the mix as well. So very, very happy there with 130 tackles. If he can repeat that, fantastic, especially, like I said, if Jaquan Brisker doesn't stay healthy. 5 of those 17 games, checks the bill, were double-digit tackle games. Very happy to see that. As far as tackles for loss, he had 5, which is something to, put weight on. He was able to make tackles not only on ball carriers, but the quarterbacks with 2 sacks. So he is somebody that doesn't just hang back anymore. He's getting in the mix. He's playing some box snaps. Interesting to see how it will be with Jaquan Brisker there, but I do expect Brisker still to be that free safety, and maybe that helps Kevin Byard's production for tackles. As you can see, he had 1 interception, 1 forced fumble, and 7 pass defense. So overall, with these numbers, we are here for the tackles. And if you can put up 120 or more tackles, again, he will be worth the investment here at 6. Before we move on to my number 7 guy, the highly touted rookie, I just wanted to mention we are doing a promo right now with Fast Draft. So if you haven't heard of Fast Draft yet, go on the App Store, check it out. When you use the promo code +Johnny, you can deposit up to $50 and get a match of $50. So if you want to do $20, you get your match for $20. This is for people that love doing best ball drafts. They have offense. They have IDP, which I've done a few myself. So once again, Fast Draft, use the promo code +Johnny. You will get a deposit match up to $50. Now, moving on, we are going to talk about my number 7 defensive back here, and that's going to be a lot of controversy on this guy. You can make a case for him to be number one. You can make a case for him to be top three. I'm staying modest here with number 7, and that is Travis Hunter. Travis Hunter, of course, we have not seen him play a game yet. He is a rookie. Christian Kirk is not in Jacksonville anymore. You're asking me why I'm talking about offense with a defensive back. He is a defensive back, but he's basically a cheat code at the position here. I'm going to just prep you by saying don't expect much IDP production from this guy. I have him about 30, 35 tackles. Sure, he can get more. Maybe 50 is about the max, I'd say, unless he really, they prefer him playing defense, and the offense then might hurt a little bit. But I don't see this guy being a full-time player on both sides of the ball. I do think he will have his big plays on defense. Maybe we can get, like I said, 30, 35 additional tackles. But I wanted to show you this, so bear with me. Let me change my screen here. I'm going to go take you to one of my Yahoo leagues, okay? And this is a tackle-heavy scoring. I'm going to show you something here. This is tackle-heavy scoring defensive backs from last season. So 2024, you can see Budda Baker with his 164 tackles. He had 282 points. He was the breadwinner. Nick Cross was number 2 as far as IDP defensive backs with 260. Let's take a look at the wide receivers here. This is interesting. So, a lot of people say that that Travis Hunter will be a top 15, top 10 wide receiver. Let's just say that he is the bottom of this is a top 25. Let's just say he puts up Puka numbers, which, Puka, I'm sure is going to have a better year than he did last year. But 218 points if Travis Hunter was the 25th best wide receiver in fantasy, in this league, of course. And this is tackle-heavy scoring for defensive backs. Tackle-heavy has nothing to do with wide receivers unless they get a tackle, of course. But Puka Nacua, let's say Travis Hunter is going to be Puka Nacua of last year. So let's take that 218 points. Let's go back to our defensive backs. Let's see where he would have ranked there. 218 would have been right between Jeremy Chin and Julian Love. So as we can count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, he would have been 8th on defensive backs. And that is, of course, without tackles. So let's say he got another 30 tackles. Maybe you play where a solo's 2 points, 1 point for an assist, right? That would be maybe another 50, 60 points. So at that point, we're looking at 260. He's right here with Nick Cross. He's up in second, third place at worst. So this is a very telling statistic to me. Again, there's 2 ways this could go. Maybe Travis Hunter, is a top 5 wide receiver, and he's absolutely the number 1 defensive back. Maybe you're in a league where you don't get, you don't get offensive points for defensive players. In that case, you're voiding him, you're fading him, you're not drafting him at all. But if you are in a league like this where you do get that hybrid production, your offensive production can turn into fantasy points on the defensive side, there's a good case to be made to take him number 1 overall. Now, if I'm right now in a redraft draft, it's tough to take him over what I know Budda Baker can do, what I know Nick Cross, some of these other guys can do. But cemented in the top 8 nonetheless. I think 7's pretty modest. Easily by those numbers, you could say top 3, top 5 defensive back. But again, you have to be getting the offensive points translated to defense to make good on this. If you're just drafting Travis Hunter for what he's going to do on defense, I don't think he's going to be rosterable the whole year. But again, on the offensive side, if we expect him to be a top 25 or higher wide receiver, then it's definitely going to translate. If you're that, scoring, translates over to defense. So Travis Hunter, absolutely a cheat code here. I'll be, diving into him more. This is kind of my first look, but I just thought that was an interesting stat that I wanted to throw at you. So I'm going to take you back to the list now, share my screen with the rest of our list, and we will come to number 8. So moving on to number 8, we have a veteran in Kyle Hamilton. As you can see on my list, 24 years old, still very young, did not miss a game last season, played all 17. Kyle Hamilton started off the season very strong. I believe he had 4 or 5 of those 5 double-digit tackle games in the first couple games, but slowed down after, especially in the second half. Something that, and the stat was 5 of 5 games. Okay, he had 5 games with 10 or more tackles, but especially later in the season, this stat kind of resonates with me. He had 8, Kyle Hamilton, of course, 8 games under 5 tackles. He faded hard at the end. If you follow the depth chart, you were in IDP leagues, you probably know the name Ardarius Washington. Simultaneously, when Ardarius Washington started playing safety alongside Kyle Hamilton's tackles numbers dipped hard. So I think there was few games there, many games, or I'm sorry, eight under 5 or more tackles. So if you're getting only 5 tackles or less, you're kind of hurting the production at that point. So Kyle Hamilton, yes, he's a walking bomb. He had 5 double-digit tackle games, 9 pass defense. He had 2 sacks, 2 forced fumbles. This guy absolutely is a walking bomb. In 2023 was terrific as well. 15 games played, 81 tackles with 3 sacks, 10 tackles for loss, 13 pass defense, and 4 interceptions. So that's tough to look past. But I'm interested to see what happens when Malachi Starks is the starter next to Kyle Hamilton, who the real Kyle Hamilton is. He could be anywhere from number 1 on this list. He could fall out of the top 10, depending on how that tackle consistency goes this year. I still like him a lot. I still think if you can get him at 8, it's a value. I do believe he's going to have over 100 tackles, maybe looking at 110, 115. And this is, of course, is somebody who can get interceptions, sacks. They use him in a very intriguing role there. A lot of box snaps for him, a lot of tackles for loss, getting to the quarterback, the ball carrier first. So, Kyle Hamilton to me, again, is that guy who can definitely be a top 3 return to form, or he could even fade a little bit more. So this is a lot of name in him. Don't really fall for the name. We're going to see what happens with training camp. Of course, we're not going to know the real Kyle Hamilton until the season starts off. But I don't think he's exactly the player that we thought he was last year. He's going to have to prove it for me. Moving on to number 9, 28-year-old. Again, seems like he's been playing a really long time. Derwin James played 16 games, missed 1 last season. The lowest tackles per game he averaged here on this list with only 5.8. But I'm still bullish on him, still in my top 10. In those 16 games played, 93 tackles. Let's just say he has that last 17th game and he probably gets 6 or 7 tackles. He's probably sitting at 100 tackles. Still had 2 out of the 16. Nothing to hang your hat on, but still had multiple games with over 10 tackles. But, this is where it really started to pick up for Derwin James. Look at the tackles for loss. He is tied with Budda Baker with the most for safeties with 10. He led the league with 5.5 tackles for safeties. And that wasn't really an outlier. These numbers are kind of who Derwin James is. When we look at the season before last year, 2023, 16 games played, 125 tackles. 86 of those were solos. He had 2 sacks 2 seasons ago, an interception, 5 tackles for loss, 7 pass defense. Not only is Derwin James somebody who is used to getting 100-plus tackles, and 4 out of 5 full seasons, Derwin James has 100 or more tackles. So I expect that to get back to north of 100. But Derwin James is also somebody who gets at the ball carrier behind the line like nobody else. As we can see, 5.5 sacks. 22% of his career games, he's had a sack. So very impressive there, Derwin James. I don't think a lot of safeties you can say that about. And as far as the forced fumbles, he had 0 last year, but that's something that he can do on the regular. So Derwin James, bottom line is he had a down year. I'm not really buying into it too much. Maybe that was the truth. There was new coaching there. Maybe that's kind of the way it's going to be. The jury's still out on that, but I'm kind of expecting Derwin James to return to that 110, 120 tackle season. And if we can retain some of these sacks, 3 or 4 sacks, 5 to 10 tackles for loss still, I think there's a lot of ground to be made up for Derwin James. So again, 28 years old, I'm not giving up on him. Sure, he's had some injury spouts, but still, this is a name that I'm buying into. I still think he's one of the best when he's out there and healthy. Number 10, Julian Love, still in the prime of his career, another player who's been around a long time. 17 games played last season. The tackles dipped, no way around it. 6.4 average per game, which brings our total to 109. Now, 79 of those were solos, so very telling. Julian Love before 2024, the last 2 years, 2023, 2022, he eclipsed 120 tackles. I was expecting him absolutely to be a repeater I believe I had him at number 5 or number 6 last year. He's dipping all the way down to 10 now, and I think there's a case to be made that he can go even further. I'll get to that in 1 minute. But Julian Love he still is a dynamic player. I think absolutely one of the most underrated players in the league. Very versatile for that Seattle defense. We saw the tackles fall, but he did have 3 interceptions, which was very telling. 2 forced fumbles and 12 pass defense. So this is somebody who excels in coverage. Interestingly, with Julian Love, one of the things I can say is looking at his game logs. Week 7 is when Kobe Bryant kind of made his debut. His coming out party. He started playing full-time snaps. Those first 6 games for Julian Love, I believe he had all 3 of those double-digit tackle performances in those first 6 games. I want to say it was 46 tackles in those first 6 games, right? With 3 double-digit tackle performances. You thought Julian Love was going to have 140 tackles. He was on pace for it. And then week 7, Kobe Bryant came in, and then Julian Love had 0 double-digit tackle games the rest of the season. The average took a hit. So Kobe Bryant kind of, turned things out for the worst here. I'm not sure. I do think Kobe Bryant will be a starter. They also have a rookie, Nick Emanwari, who, we'll see how he's used. He's a highly touted defensive back as well. So things are getting a little muddy here in Seattle, but one thing that is for certain is Julian Love is a important centerpiece of that defense. And I think this is a player who can return to 115, 120 tackles. And in that case, he gets a bump. He's a value here. He would probably be a top 6 defensive back. So, again, a long offseason for him. We're going to see what happens before the season starts, hopefully, and learn about what kind of role he has on his plate this year. Maybe the hybrid role is kind of taking his IDP value down a little bit. But I'm banking on Julian Love. This is a player that I love, and I think this is the year to get him discounted. So still absolutely on my top 12. Same with number 11, Jessie Bates, 28 years old, played a full 17 games played, only averaged 6 tackles, still eclipsed over 100 with 102 total tackles. 62 of those were solo, 40 assists. But as much as the tackles dipped last year for Jessie Bates, he still had 3 double-digit tackle games. But those games where he wasn't getting a lot of tackles, he probably did hurt your IDP rosters unless you're in big play scoring, because he finished the season with 4 interceptions, 4 forced fumbles, and astounding 10 passes defense. So Jessie Bates, still a solid player, still a solid tackler. Over 110 tackles in 2 out of the 7 seasons he's played. He's only had 1 sack in those 7 seasons. So this is a guy who we're not banking on sacks on at all. We're just going to, expect it to be 0. But Jessie Bates, as much as that's a negative, the positives for him is he's had 24 interceptions in those 7 seasons. He's had 10 interceptions over the last 2 seasons and 10 forced fumbles in his career. And 7 of those have come over the last 2 seasons. So specifically looking at interceptions and forced fumbles, splash plays, Jessie Bates has held his weight there. He's actually been better in that category, but the tackles have kind of fallen, because of it. But still, a player who we expect to get 100 or more tackles and can do this, this kind of pass coverage damage, can still cause forced fumbles. Jessie Bates is still absolutely one of the best safeties in the league, so don't overlook him. I expect those tackle numbers to come up a bit, and if he can retain that interception, forced fumble, pass coverage, 10 pass defense role, then I think we have a diamond on our hands, somebody who's going to be overlooked this year. Even though the safety room in Atlanta has gotten better, they bring in Jordan Fuller, I believe Xavier Watts, a rookie there. I don't think either of these guys are going to eat into Jessie Bates' snaps, but maybe them playing alongside him will change his role, maybe for the better. We'll see. Finally, number 12, 29-year-old Kyle Duggar. Just kind of the consistency guy here. Year after year, he's been doing it. He has a couple more years with the Patriots. I believe his contract's up in 2027. So not exactly a contract year, but does have something to play for. Was banged up last year, was not healthy. Only played 13 games. Tackles were a little bit down, 6.2 a game. But still, in those 13 games, he had 81 tackles. If he had 4 more games, good chance he would have hit 100. 2 of those games were double-digit tackle games. 8 tackles for loss, 4 pass defense. He did have a forced fumble. He did have a sack. And that's the kind of player that just Kyle Duggar is. I expect him to get 100 north of 100 tackles. I expect him to have a sack or two, 8 to 10 tackles for loss. Kyle Duggar is a guy that, isn't going to set the world on fire as far as tackles. He's not going to have 7 or 8 double-digit tackle games, but when he does have big games, it's you reap the benefits in IDP. And yes, there are games where he has 3 or 4 tackles, but those are outliers. Kyle Duggar, 8 out of 13 games played last season, he had 8 out of 13 games, he had 6 or more tackles in 8 of those games. So still, majority of his games, he was productive for IDP. I think he can, return to his form. Maybe the injury was hurting him a little bit last year. So I still believe in Kyle Duggar. This is somebody who I'm gonna. He's on the mix of on my mind to drop into the defensive back 2 rankings, but still I just expect him to return to form and still eclipse 100 tackles. So can't find many players out there that you expect to do that. And Kyle Duggar, I think there wasn't a long time ago we were talking him as a top 6, top 8 defensive back. So kind of throw away last season. He's still a solid player, and I expect him to be solid for IDP as well. That is it for my list. I just wanted to also mention, if you are not a viewer or if you're not a subscriber to YouTube, go ahead and do that. But also become a subscriber to our IDP Plus homepage here. I want to show you some of the tools we are working with. I did not mention it explicitly in this video, but I do value a lot. If you want to look at these defensive backs, linebackers, or even defensive linemen, and you want to look at some of our tools we have on our website, one of the tools that I would be definitely considering before redraft season is just last season's the weekly fantasy finishes, right? So if you go here, first off, you can see not only the last season, but you can see the last 3 years. So we can go back to 2022, 2023, and 2024. If you wanted to see how many times Zaire Franklin was a top 5 finisher in 2024, you can see that right here. Week 3, he was 6th. Week 7, he was 7th, and so on and so forth. Week 12, he was 5th in all of, and this is, of course, you can change it by your scoring format, tackle premium, big play premium. So this is a great outlier. I will be diving into this, although I didn't mention it on this particular podcast. I can go here to defensive backs and see how many times Budda Baker finished in the top 5, the top 10, whatever I want to see. So not only do we have weekly finishes, we have injury report trackers, we have snap tools, we have team fantasy points allowed by position, and then we have some betting tools as well. So really good tools there if you want to become a subscriber and get more in-depth with your fantasy research. So I will reference those coming up in upcoming videos. But I just wanted to mention that to you. And as always, thank you for rocking with me. If you have any questions, drop them in the comment box. If you want to check out linebackers, it's coming up. But you can check out defensive linemen. Axton, I believe, did a top 48 of that. Check the IDP Plus channel on YouTube, and you can see Axton's top 48 at defensive line for the upcoming 2025 season. And we will see you back. Don't forget, I got 13 through 24 top defensive backs coming out within a few days. So stay tuned. Thanks for rocking with me. We will see you next time on the IDP Plus podcast.
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.